Wonderful. Thank you for coming to the Indian Newslink office, Michael. How are you?
Very good today. We're down to our final 5 days of election campaigning now, so
Yep.
very, very busy at the moment from the start of the day until the very end of the day. But I find that quite an energising period, so I'm feeling really good, enjoying working with my volunteers and
All right.
doing everything I can to get a good result this election.
Okay, that's good. How's campaigning been going for you?
Oh, very positive. We have a really great team in Mount Roskill, lots and lots of volunteers who have been getting stuck in. We've had a really strong response from people. And we run a pretty old fashioned campaign in Mount Roskill.
Okay.
We do a lot of work on the ground. We get around and knock on a lot of doors. I've been holding street corner meetings every day in the late afternoon, getting around local neighbourhoods and meeting with local residents and really getting that message out about getting out and voting over the next week. So we know this will be a tight election. We know that we've been coming from a little bit behind, but I'm really feeling really positive as we head into the final week that we've got good momentum that's building.
Okay. And what have the people of Mount Roskill been telling you, Michael?
Look, a few key things have been coming through in the conversations in Mount Roskill. The first has been a really big focus on that whole set of issues around cost of living.
Yep.
So when I talk to people about what are the most important things for you or your family, I would say that 70% of people would say cost of living pressures. And so people are really keen to hear about the things that we want to do to help in that space. Things like cheaper public transport,
Yep.
free prescriptions, cheaper early childhood education, free dental for under 30s. And people are really interested in how those things could make a positive difference. There's been a focus on the set of issues around crime and law and order as well.
Yes.
And it's been good to have those conversations with people because people don't just want to hear politicians put slogans out there about this issue. They really want to hear, well, what are the things we would actually do
Yes.
to make our communities safer? And so it's been a great opportunity to talk about some of the things we want to do in that space, getting more police on the beat, stronger penalties around ram raiding offences that we have put in place,
Yes.
things like that. So that's been a good conversation. But then over the last week, the additional thing that's come through from people is people want to see a stable and steady government. People are really worried by this talk of a second election that we've heard from National.
Yes.
They're worried about the instability of Winston Peters. No one knows what he would do. So people, I think, are really beginning to think, how do we get a stable government that we can count on? And of course, that's what you get with a party vote for Labor.
What would a third term with Labour be like for you?
I think in a third term of a Labor government, there's a huge amount of progress we can make.
Yes.
Obviously, over the last 5 or 6 years, we've had massive issues to deal with.
Yep.
COVID-19 being the obvious one, but also the extreme weather of earlier this year. And we've been able to make great progress on many fronts during that time. We've lifted 77,000 kids out of poverty. We've got unemployment down to some of the lowest levels in 40 years. We've begun to rebuild our health and education systems after years of neglect. But with 3 further years, we can really start to make great progress in all of those areas. So I look forward, for example, to seeing things like a lot of further progress on the issues around climate change. We've now begun to reduce our emissions over the last 3 years, and they're down to the lowest level in 10 years through policies like the Clean Car Discount, which National would abolish. We can make much more progress in that area. We can make much more progress in education. Obviously, education was really disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. We're now making steady progress in getting the levels of attendance and the levels of achievement back up. Every term, attendance is increasing. Through our investments in education, we can continue to make that progress and give all of our kids great opportunities in life. Really excited to see what we can do in the trade space. We have signed huge free trade agreements over the last few years,
Yes.
and we've indicated that as a government, our next really important priority this term will be strengthening the trade relationship with India. And I really want to see us take that to the next level because there's so much opportunity there for both countries. So a newly elected Labor government has a really strong agenda to move on with. Those great policies I talked about before, things like basic free dental care for New Zealanders. That will be a game changer for so many people who are put off by the cost of getting basic dental care. So we're really ambitious and really positive about the good things we can achieve in the next 3 years.
Okay. And you talked about a good relationship with India, but Chris Hipkins did promise that he would go in the first 100 years to India. Sorry, the first 100 days, not years. I apologize for that. But do you think it would be easy for him to go and like meet with Prime Minister Modi, because Prime Minister Modi is also campaigning, if you know, India has the general elections next year, so he will be a very busy man to get in touch with. So how do you think like that would be dealt with?
Well, look, as you say, we've been really clear. This will be one of our top priorities on the trade and foreign affairs front. It's been a really good lot of results we've got in the last few years with free trade agreements to the EU and the United Kingdom, but massive potential in the relationship with India. The relationship is, I think, already very, very strong.
Yep.
We've had a lot of senior level ministerial visits going both ways over the past 1 to 2 years since the COVID border shutdowns. The precise details as to when and where leaders can meet, that gets worked out between the respective foreign offices, but I'm sure there'll be a way of achieving that, and I'm sure that for both countries that will be a real priority. And simply having the Prime Minister say, this is at the top of our priority list, I intend to be there within the next 100 days, that sends a very strong message about the priority that our Labor government puts on the relationship and taking the next steps. I think everyone knows that you never get to a free trade agreement straight away, not with any two countries. No. You work on the relationship, you take steps, you begin to work through the issues, but this is Labor saying this is really important and we're going to put resource and time into it.
All right, okay. And lastly, would you like to give a message to all your constituents in Mount Roskill and our readers for Indian Newslink?
Sure. Well, look, I have two key messages as we're 5 days out from the election. The first is asking every single person who is eligible, please go and vote. We live in a great little democracy. We have the opportunity and I believe the responsibility to all participate. So please make sure you get out and vote and consider casting an early vote at one of the early vote locations before election day. It's much quicker and easier. Secondly, please make it 2 ticks for Labor. It's Labor who's led our country through some of the most difficult times in our history. We saved 20,000 lives during COVID. We have experienced and caring leadership. And we will be a stable government. What we're seeing on the other side of politics is the potential for a coalition of cuts and chaos with National Act and New Zealand First. They can't even agree between themselves and they're talking about a second election. That is the last thing that our country needs. With Labor, you can count on a government that will be stable, that will keep investing in housing, health and education, that won't leave people behind, and that will also be a strong voice for our Indian and our migrant communities. We're the government who reopened the parent category, and we're the government that's committing to the new super visa policy to make it easier for parents and grandparents to visit New Zealand. You'll never get that in a National Act New Zealand First government. New Zealand First will veto it, I guarantee it now.
All right, thank you so much for coming in today, Michael.
Thank you, pleasure.